Hey, Corey.
Oh, hi there. It's my first time doing something like this on
Hey,
Instagram, so I wasn't
aw-
sure how well it was going to work.
hey, that's awesome. I have to be honest, this is probably our fourth time doing this, and every time we usually begin, I'm still nervous if it's actually going to work.
Well,
Hey,
it's good that it is.
yeah, great to have you. Unfortunately, we can't also put try on this because it only allows for two screens. Um, but nonetheless, we're really great to have you here for the show, and would love to just pick your brain on some of the things that you guys will be working on, and just go into a lot of the backstory of the start of my life in gaming.
Sure.
Um,
Yeah, sounds great.
yeah, so I kind of actually just want to start about the channel itself. I mean, when you guys, well, when I first discovered you guys, maybe like 6, 7 years ago at this point, I think it was like 2014-ish around then that I discovered
Yeah.
you guys.
Hmm?
But
Yeah, it's crazy. It has been as long as it has. We launched the channel at the very end of 2013 uh, with a series of videos that are basically we were not present in it at all. It was they were just kind of taken off of these old VHS tapes that I rented growing up, where it was how to win at Nintendo games, and we took that and we uh, did it with modern games, which it was funny because we had spent all this time building these um, like these capture setups and to get the best looking captures that we can, and then we ran it through a VCR to make it look as bad as we could.
and that's funny you mentioned it because now that whole VCR aesthetic, that's like the hot thing now on
Yeah,
Instagram. It's like what people love doing, that whole
yeah.
energy.
I'd like to think that we were ahead of the curve, but we actually we didn't use any filters. We actually I output to a VCR and then recorded that back
Wow.
to actual tape.
Wow. And so it's actually funny because when I look back at the original videos, you guys were doing this at a time on YouTube when really that high production quality feel and that well produced edited content, that wasn't yet really kind of a thing yet on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
And you were, in a way, you guys were really way ahead of the curve because you guys really added especially to video games,
Mm-hmm.
to the video game genre, you guys
Right.
really added this documentary feel, or this well-produced content that was really unheard of. Was that always kind of the plan from the very beginning, though, as you started getting more into the master classes?
That was the intent early on because we were both working in post production. I was working at a post house in New York City, and Trey worked for a college doing video stuff. And we really wanted to take that and just say, okay, we can use our expertise of what we were doing on a day to day basis, but also use that to edit and create stuff that could get excited about. Uh, because I mean, I was doing like a lot of medical stuff. He was doing a lot of stuff based around like his college that he worked for, and this was our way to take that and probably learn a lot more as well. Because when you're passionate about something, you push yourself to figure out new stuff and to make things look a lot better than you normally would. And I mean, that was always the intent, though, is going into it, say, okay, we can make something that's very tightly edited. But what's really funny is we had no intent on ever being on camera. We never made an appearance on camera until probably like February after launching in October. And that was because we were at MagFest that year and we were at a panel for Retroware TV. And we saw these people's videos and they're like, oh, well, they're all in it. So I guess like maybe we could do it.
Yeah, and,
So
and
that's
actually, the joy of also watching the videos is actually seeing you and Try actually, and it's really cool because you guys are actually not in the same physical location. So I can just imagine the whole editing back and forth is I guess talk about how intense that is to kind of do an edit from two different locations.
well, it's not that bad. We do everything via. I mean, for the longest time, we did everything via Dropbox, and the episodes when they would come out when we made them, a lot of times the other person wouldn't be in them. I mean, early on, and so our episodes were our own. So we would write them, edit them, shoot them, and everything, and we just you handle your own. He handles Try and handles his own. But as we started going back and forth with putting us both in. He shoots his stuff, and we like about 2 years ago we got a NAS, a network attached storage, where it functions essentially like our own Dropbox cloud. So I can drop stuff on there, and he can grab it either via FTP or it'll just sync to his desktop. And that has sped up everything a lot too. But he'll provide all the footage that I would need. And then as we've really gone to great extents to make our sets, not so much when we're on camera, but the backgrounds and the locations where we shoot a lot of our B-roll, we lit them as closely as possible to each other, and we got the same backdrops. And I have a different kind of table than he does, but for all intents and purposes, I can send him footage or he can send me footage, and we have a preset for color correcting that will just make them match. So, I mean, that's been a big part of what we have been trying to do to streamline. But as time goes on, and as hopefully very soon, we're going to be we have a whole different workflow lined up where where one of us will be editing, and then the other person is just constantly feeding the other person or the editor footage. So, when you're doing everything by yourself, or most of the stuff by yourself, it's hard to really get into a rhythm where, you're editing, oh, okay, I need this shot. So I got to go and shoot it and then come back, and you kind of lose that rhythm. Or you write down all these shots that you need, and then you go and do that all at once. But more like just shots that you need. And especially if you look back, very few B-roll shots to being very, very B-roll heavy. So that just adds up to the amount of work that it takes. So
were you both of you guys have been on camera at the same time?
Yeah. I mean, there's been times where we've both been together on camera. A lot of times we have done these video logs where we do it for our like Patreon supporters, where maybe if we're both doing it, like if one of us is visiting the other, we live about 8 hours apart. So it's not out of the question for one of us to go and visit the other.
Gotcha.
But mainly if we have a project that we need to do together, and we will try to shoot some stuff, and we'll physically be in the same place then when we shoot a lot of that stuff. But like now that you mention it, I'm not sure if in any official episode if we've ever been side by side in it.
That will be kind of like the big reveal that, whoa, we've never seen this one before from these guys.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think that people have understand that we're not in the same place, but I feel that we've gotten our style down well enough that it's never really a back and forth between us. It's kind of, okay, I'm hosting this segment, then there's a break, and then there's try segment, and it goes back and forth, and we usually have a good way to separate those segments.
And it's very fascinating because you mentioned all the stuff that you guys are doing with the color correction to make it match. It literally looks like every time people watch these videos that it's so seamless, your editing. It's almost like you guys are right next to each other at the edit base, doing everything in unison. So kudos to you guys for making this work. Especially I think it's you guys are the perfect editors when it comes to just putting footage together. Typically for every episode, how much footage do you normally how much gameplay footage do you have to actually barrel through just to produce one episode?
Well, it depends. I mean, it would be nice if we needed more gameplay footage, because as time has gone on, we focus more on the tech side of it. Then we're only getting maybe 2 or 3 minutes of gameplay per game, just to kind of showcase what we might be talking about or to do a comparison. But I mean, I think you'll see us doing more game-focused stuff. We used to do a lot of game-focused stuff where we'd play through the game. There would be a bunch of game footage that we'd have. But that just doesn't tend to happen as much anymore. But we launched a different series of episodes. We call them MLeg Minis, which, I mean, I wish they were mini in terms of the length, because we still can't manage to keep them under 20 minutes. But it's more of a conversational setup where we will be talking to each other on Discord, but we'll be shooting with our own cameras, and we can kind of bounce back and forth. And a lot of stuff that we've done on there has been tech focused, but we're going to be experimenting with just talking about games that we want to talk about.
And so what are some of the recent games, I guess, that you guys have been like playing? Because when most people who watch a lot of your, your YouTube channel, they tend to think it's mostly retro games. So do you guys play anything that are, the modern gen?
I mean, we play a lot of retro games, but I mean, people might be surprised that we actually do play a lot of modern games as well. Mm-hmm. We just both finished up the Final Fantasy VII remake. And
don't blow it. Don't blow the spoilers for me, man.
I'm not going to blow anything out there. But
I still gotta play it myself. I want to know what's different.
Well, I mean, yeah, exactly. I don't want to spoil it. But we were both fans of the original. I mean, the original came out just as I was starting college, so I have a very, very vivid memories of playing it. And he played it a little bit later, but we both had a lot of thoughts. So that is going to be our first game focused mini that we did. We had a lot to say, and somehow we managed to talk about it for 2 hours. So I got to try to cut that down to something that people are gonna want to watch.
I think if you guys even put out that full 2-hour conversation, people would still love it. I think that's actually kind of you put that into the full unedited version, people would still dig it. So as a content creator, I think you guys definitely should just release it out there.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm not sure if we would put it out there, but we might we might release it as a side thing. I mean, we have a playlist on our channel that has all of our bonus stuff, our bonus and behind the scenes stuff that is unlisted, but it's in a public playlist where people can go through, and you'll probably be surprised at how much stuff is in there. There's almost 100 videos.
Wow.
of bonus material. But the thing is, we don't want that kind of stuff to dilute our video list, where it's all very curated and edited stuff. So we don't want people to think oh, why are they releasing this kind of stuff now?
Gotcha. So when you guys actually started the channel, did you guys imagine that it would blow up to be this big? And in terms of, just I'll be honest, you guys are the de facto source when it comes to master classes in visual fidelity, not even just in video games at this point, but almost just maximizing, your modern television. Did you ever think it would get to this point where it's wow, you guys are literally the go-to guys to determine, how to do it right?
Mainly, I mean, first off, I think it's important for me to say, and I always say this when people say oh, you guys are the place to go. We could not do what we do without the help of people like Bob from Retro RGB, Steve Kula from HD Retrovision, Artemio Urbina. There's so many people that help us go through our scripts and make sure things check out or are correct, or maybe it's just okay, so you might have you're generalizing too much here, or I suggest you mention this. I mean, we would not be anywhere without the people who help us doing that. I mean, we owe so much to them that we probably could never repay it to them.
And those guys are great. Bob, people who don't know is Retro RGB. He's also another great YouTube channel. Was also previously at LI Retro last year, actually. Really amazing content. And also when it comes to just product reviews,
Yes.
By far and above, brutally honest, really gets straight to the point, really to help you figure out if this is a purchase or not.
Right.
But yeah, the people that you're all mentioning, these are all great names, and the fact that they're all connected with you guys, it's amazing. The circle that you guys are all in.
We've been very, very lucky. But I mean, I don't think that we ever expected it to be to the level that it is, especially because there was at no point where we really felt like we had this big blow up moment. I mean, maybe at a point where we had one video and it did more, got more views than any other video than we had at that point. That was the N64 anti-aliasing hack video, which just managed to catch on someplace. But there's been no point. It's been a very, very steady climb. Mm-hmm. So, which is a good thing, I think, because if you have if you have one of those moments where you suddenly have you get tens and tens of thousands of subscribers who subscribe for just that one thing, then you're gonna like lose some every time that you don't do something like that. So it becomes like this big like balancing act. But I feel like our growth has been slow and steady enough that basically the people who are subscribed are interested in just like most of the stuff that we want to talk about, whether it's like video quality or if it's just like games or if it's like our weekly live stream, which is like, you know, every Sunday night we stream on our channel, and we've been doing it for almost 5 years now. And I think we've only missed maybe like 10 times total in those 5 years. And but it's just like, it's really consistent. It's much more consistent than the release of our actual show. But that stream is in the last year has really shot up in popularity.
Wow.
And it's fun, you know. Sometimes we have people on with us where it's just, you know, if we're interviewing somebody, but we're just like playing a game. Every week, you know, we'll pick a game to play, and the game is secondary to the discussion, I suppose, or in the questions that we ask, like, or they're asked of us, like via the chat. But I mean, I think that it's been such a slow growth that we never really expected it to like be as big as it is, and it's kind of surreal.
And so for people who don't know, I believe the live stream is on your YouTube channel.
Right.
Is it also on Twitch or any other platforms?
We've done some stuff on Twitch. We do have a Twitch channel, but we don't use it very much. I've been trying to use it more, but it's more casual. Well, I feel like our Sunday night live stream is more of it's kind of a show at this point. But the stuff we do over on Twitch, I mean, I edited an entire episode on Twitch a couple weeks ago, and you know, it's more casual and laid back, where we don't feel like we have to be like super focused on the chat or anything. We're just hanging out, and I could kind of show people my workflow. I set up all kinds of different webcams, so if I want to shoot B-roll, I could switch over to like a B-roll cam showing what I was doing at a different place. And I mean, I think it was like 3 days of 4-hour streams.
Wow.
But I mean, it's cool. But we like the stuff that we do on Sundays, we always have the other person there. So one person can play the game and the other person can always pay attention to the chat.
Gotcha.
So, and it's good because it makes the viewers at least feel like they're a part of it.
Gotcha. Now, it's interesting because when you guys start to branch out and cover other topics besides, you know, visual fidelity and, you know, audio, like beyond AV topics, you start branching into other cultures of video games, or sorry, other aspects of video game culture.
Right.
And last year you released that M2 documentary. Mm-hmm. So can you kind of go into the process of, you know, what made you guys decide, hey, let's go do this documentary on M2? And how long did this process, you know, take?
Well, okay. So when we first conceived the channel, I was living in New York City at the time, and I was listening to a lot of podcasts, and I was really inspired by a podcast, This American Life.
Yep.
And also like WTF with Mark Maron and Retronauts. So those three, I wanted to make something centered around video games that kind of has that same feel. So doing documentary stuff was always basically the dream of what I wanted to do. But you can't talk people into letting you do documentaries until you have like a body of work to show them. So, you know, that's when we started just doing like the basic videos that we did on the channel. But the documentary stuff is a lot of work, but it's always the stuff that we're probably the most passionate about. So I guess our M2 happened because that was put together by Limited Run Games, who we did a documentary on several years ago, and we formed a relationship with them very, very early on in their whole career. And I guess like in the early on in the creation of the company. Yep. And they were happy with the documentary that we did on them. And then following that, we we're doing a documentary on Night Trap, because that's a whole other.
That's
like,
a huge backstory with
yeah,
that.
yeah. I mean, there's a lot of ins and outs of how that even worked out.
Yeah.
It was almost like winning the lottery. Going back to me, like meeting this guy in New York City when I lived there, like we were at Barricade in Brooklyn and playing a game of Final Fight, and we were just like started talking about Final Fight and talked about how the Sega CD version of Final Fight is. I said it's my favorite version, and we became fast friends because
it's two players, man. It's a two players. That's why.
Exactly. And he has all three characters.
Yeah.
And so, like, I became friends with somebody, and then I moved when I left New York City. I moved to Cincinnati, and the guy that I knew from New York was friends with another guy who was like working on full motion video games, and it just turns out that he was remaking or remastering Night Trap, and he lived randomly, like out of nowhere, like lived like 5 minutes away from me.
Wow.
So we were like, we really want to do this Night Trap documentary. And even then I was able to say, so nobody knew that Night Trap was coming. So I contacted Limited Run and I said, something's happening that you might be interested in. And he's like, well, let us know what it is. And I told him Night Trap, and he's like, say no more. And then like they got in contact, and like that's how Night Trap like happened with Limited Run.
Wow.
But we were already shooting this documentary on Night Trap. So when that was almost finished, and the release of Night Trap was coming up, Limited Run said, hey, do you want to release this on Blu-ray? We can release it alongside the game. And of course, yeah. I mean, that's kind of a dream, you know? And so that released, and they released 1,000 copies to go with the copies of the game. And then I don't remember when it was. I think it was like a few months later, Try was visiting Limited Run, because Limited Run is based in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Try's like lives in Charlotte, so he's like 2 hours away from them. So he was down there for some reason, and the M2 came up for some reason. He was like, oh man, Corey would love to do something on M2, because that's like, you know, I was big fan of their Sega Ages 2500 releases in Japan. You know, just like seeing stuff like that. And when they when the game was Battle Garriga that was going to release, so they said, do you want to do a documentary on M2, and like we'll send you to Japan to shoot this, and we'll set it all up. And like we went, and that whole experience was crazy and amazing to go to Japan. I thought I knew what jet lag was until I had no idea until I came home. And I was like, oh, this is what jet lag is. But just like making it, and I'd never like really edited anything or written anything or based around like another, like it was in another language.
Yeah.
So here I was like taking all these sound bites with a very broad script of what I thought the people were, what the interviewees were telling me, which was based on what our interpreters were. So I tried to build this whole story around that, and saying like, hoping that it's going to be all right. And when it was finally ready to send off for like a proper interpretation or like a translation, we sent it off to this guy, Alex Highsmith, who runs a very good website called Schmupulations, which is known for translating old Japanese interviews in like old gaming magazines and stuff, and just releasing them. And I sent it off to him, and when I got that back, I was like, I couldn't believe that it was actually going to work.
Wow.
Because it was such a feeling of relief. And yeah, so I mean, that got to be part of the special edition of Battle Garriga.
Wow. And it was probably, in all honesty, like it came at the perfect time. It came out right before the Genesis, the Mega Drive Mini or Mega Drive Classic. I forget what it's called. And then as well as like, I didn't realize that they were also working on the TurboGrafx 16 or PC Engine Mini. Like these guys are pretty much, if you have a mini system, someone get M2 in the door because they're the ones that are going to do it properly in a way.
Exactly. And that was kind of that was what was amazing is, well, when we were there, we had no idea that this was even coming. Yeah. All that stuff was even like that they were working on that. Mainly because, I mean, they Japanese developers, from what I understand, especially in our experience, it's a much different experience going in there and like their secrecy, like they're very like, okay, we can't take you up to the studio when there's people here working on stuff, which would have been amazing to see. But I mean, there's been other chances where we've gone into like American studios and it's like, oh, you can just hang out in this in our meeting and everything. And so it was much different, but we had no idea that any of that stuff was that they were working on it. So it was this time that was right before they really exploded.
Wow.
I guess they just really had a lot of stuff in the works there.
Yeah, and it's I'll be honest, like I did not know about the lore of M2 really until the documentary that you guys did. Well, and again, like I think now, you know, especially it's great that you guys do like that guys did that documentary, because now people are starting to look back at a lot of Japanese developers that we, you know, in honesty, that we took for granted. And now looking back on them, we're trying to rediscover their catalogs. And it's, you know, again, like all the information that you guys are trying to bring out to the public, you guys are bringing not just video game knowledge, you're bringing like cultural, historical knowledge out there, right, that people can really utilize. So is there any other, I guess, Japanese developer that you would say, you know, deserves kind of to be looked at?
like dream projects?
Yeah.
I think that I would love to do something on Falcom, who created the Ease series. But not only that, but I would love to do like kind of a dream project that we've always wanted to do. And what we kind of did with M2 is we called it M2 Complete Works, where it went through like basically everything that they did up to that point. We would love to do something on Yuzo Koshiro. You know, that's kind of a high dream that we would love to do. If
there's anyone out there watching on social media, or eventually when we post this up, guys, I'm telling you right now, someone has a contact for them or some way to make it happen.
Well, we might have a contact.
Oh, really? I was about to say, if anyone's going to do it right, if anyone's going to do a piece on them right, it's going to be you guys. Seriously.
Yeah, I mean, that is definitely a dream. But doing something on Falcom would be so cool, especially since they're kind of a small company, but the Ease series and the like the Trails in the Sky or Trails of Cold Steel, what is it, the Kaseki, Legend of Heroes series have been around for so long, but they've always remained this very small team, which I think would be so cool to focus on. But I mean, and in addition to that, I mean, back in February, we released the first part of a series that we called Analog Frontiers, which is a 5-part mini-series that we've been working on. We've been working on it for about 2 years now. Wow. And part 2 is due to be out very soon, and will release throughout the rest of the next upcoming months. And that's definitely, like when that's all said and done, it might end up being the best thing that we ever do, because it is such a large thing. It's going to be nearly 5 hours in length for all of the parts. So I mean, that focuses, in a way, it's almost like a documentary version of the masterclass, of the RGB masterclass. You
guys are slowly becoming the Ken Burns of video game documentaries. So I have to ask you, actually, it's fascinating about the story you just told me about Night Trap. So a lot of these FMV games, were they filmed on film that you could think of? Because it's going to be weird how we could keep upscaling them, because if they're filmed digitally, right, it's you know, we can't do it. But Night Trap, you're right, looked amazing.
I mean, he said it was filmed on film. In the game itself, I feel like it looks very video-y, but I mean, it's very possible that when it was transferred to tape, that happened. But I mean, we were told that it was filmed on film, but nobody knows where the masters are. I mean, that would be, if the game is going to get redone, they're gonna again in the future, I would love to see, like, can you imagine like a 4K version, like a film scan of the original?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm a big Night Trap fan. I grew up with it. It came out when I was 13 years old, and in a lot of ways, that was probably the best age to play that game for the first time. A lot of people say like, "Oh, it's a terrible game. It's a terrible game." But my friends and I were obsessed with it. We loved it, and the idea that I got to make that documentary is kind of surreal. I wish I could go back in time and tell it to my 13-year-old self, and I would, because we never thought of it like, oh, it's a bad game. I mean,
you know what? It's funny you mention that, because we look back on I forget what year was it, 91 or 92 when the game came out.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that was cutting edge back then. So,
oh yeah,
you know, when that game came out, it's not like how FMV games are looked at now in terms of like shoddy gameplay. Back for us, this was, you know, like advanced. You know, this is the first time we saw full motion video in a video game system.
Mm-hmm.
And just also from a cultural standpoint, Dana Plato, she was still not that far off removed from Different Strokes, so she was like legitimate star power to be in a video game. So I guess in retrospect, like, it's, when I kind of do look back and do remember those games, though, the video quality was still bad, though. It wasn't great in the 90s. But to imagine if someone can find a lot of this source material, you know, imagine how differently they would be looked at now, you know?
Yeah, I would love to see that stuff. And it would be, I have no idea how difficult it would be to reconstruct the game, like using these like the original film, because when the remaster was made, he had 4 tapes. He had 4 files that were timed out to each other. You could basically take them and put them on 4 tracks, 4 video tracks, and when there's nothing happening on one, in certain rooms, then it would there'd be just nothing there. So he could basically like line these all up, and the game basically like made itself. He could like line them up and then drop them into the engine that he had built, and it just all works out. But I mean, I'm not sure how difficult that would be for the new, like if you had the original. Yeah. But I mean, I'm sure that he could figure it out. But that would be amazing to see that stuff. I mean,
do you think if FMV games came out now, let's say in the 4K or, you know, UHD generation, like people may actually be receptive to them?
For the first time?
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think that, I mean, there are some new ones coming out now.
Yeah.
There's one, Night Shift. Hey, oh, sorry, my son's coming in to say hi.
Oh, bring him in. Special guest.
Hi there.
Hey.
Can you wave?
How's it going?
Okay. Can you let me finish up?
He's surrounded by probably one of the greatest game collections anyone could possibly, you know, imagine. I don't think kids these age realize like how lucky they have to be around and realize like, wow, there's like amazing games out there. Because again, like, we grew up at a time when game libraries were just not as expansive in our viewpoints as they are now, right?
Yeah. I mean, he's been having some fun with here he is, like the kids, they both, he and my daughter I put on Smash Brothers for them on the Wii U. Okay, we see. Monty, I need you to go. Can you go back?
We all love amiibos. We all love amiibos, man.
Yeah, but I mean, he's been playing. So they've been playing Smash. Like they don't really know what they're doing in it. They're just like, they think it's the coolest thing when somebody new joins the battle, and they don't know who a lot of these characters are. But if they see somebody that they do know, they like freak out and get really excited about it. Sorry.
No worries, man. That's actually a lot of people right now are loving that moment. So here's a question that actually came in to our Twitter. For someone too young to know, for someone too young or just born in they're part of Generation Z, what makes retro games so special? And why should they kind of get into it using a lot of the AV techniques that you guys have like taught people?
Well, the AV techniques, especially, it just makes it more accessible for them. Mm-hmm. I mean, of course, there's always the issue of cost, because I mean, a lot of people say like, why would I want to spend all this money or this time and effort to do this stuff when I can just get a Raspberry Pi? And like that, there is that is a great argument. I mean, that's exactly. Hey, he's real excited about showing off Shovel Knight here. But I mean, there is certainly a barrier for entry, and I think it's exciting for younger generations because they can see where a lot of this is coming from. So here's a good example that Troy talked about. So over the holidays, he brought his Genesis Mini to his parents' house while he was there for the holidays, and they were having like family get together. And he set it up and was playing with one of his cousins, and they were playing Contra Hardcore. And his cousin was like, "This is pretty cool. It's just like Cuphead." So it's able to use something that's new, but say like, "Hey, this is where it kind of came from." And I think that's exciting.
Here's like another question that comes in. Normally,
Sure.
when you guys are testing visual quality of equipment, what's kind of like the ideal / perfect game that you guys usually go to test if something is like making a big difference? I know that's a very broad general question, but
I mean,
if you had to just say there's one game I can only pick.
If I just had to pick one.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we really go out of our way to make sure that to try to use as many different things as we can. I mean, it just really depends on if it's something that is relevant to the specific point that we're trying to make. I mean, if we're talking about like poor scaling, I mean, there's like if any game is like if it scrolls at a certain speed, like I always like to use if something is not scaled properly and it needs to move, and it's moving like left to right. I love the first cutscene in Ninja Gaiden, where it's like the close up of his face, like slowly moving across the screen.
Yeah.
But I mean, I wouldn't say if there's any specific game that we feel is like always a go-to. We try to mix it up as much as we can to have some familiar stuff, but also every time we release a video, it's like, oh, what's this game at this timestamp? And we get a lot of people saying like, I wish you would just list every game on screen that you show. But the problem is A, that would take forever, and B, it would like sometimes we use like 3 seconds of a game in a video. It's like you can't just like have that on the screen for a split second. It would just clutter everything up. But it's fun to I mean, if there's a way to put that in like its own subtitle track, that would be the ultimate solution, I think. but I mean, I can't really point to any specific game that is the go-to game. Like
the benchmark game is what you're saying. Like if it does X, Y, Z. I guess this Twitter user was literally looking for like the easiest way out to kind of like test everything on a one-on-one basis. So I guess as time moves on, as obviously when you guys were starting the channel, we were already deeply into the 1080p era, slowly getting to 4K. Now we're kind of moving into like the 8K era eventually. So at what point are you guys getting really worried that a lot of the upscaling efforts, it's going to reach a point of we can't get any better? It's actually going to start making diminishing returns.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of people that I think will already say that anything over 720p, which is usually like a 3x scale of these old games as it is, like a perfect 3x scale. So even going from like 720p to like 1080p, probably not that big of a jump, especially since it's like a 4.5 scale. I mean, it's not perfect. It's not a perfect scale. But 4K is a perfect scale of the 240p resolution. So you'll see, like once we have scalers that are just like straight up 480p, or not 480p, but are straight up 4K. It's going to be, I think it's going to look amazing. But who knows even from that point on? I mean, I think about how it's just a hard time. I can't imagine going beyond 4K. But then again, there was a point where I thought 1080p was like all I would ever need. But there's a lot of people who say like, I don't need any of this stuff, just use a CRT. And there's a ton of people that will say that.
Yep. And it's actually funny because a lot of people still love using their CRTs. Do you still, I guess, a lot of your retro gaming, do you still turn back to using just a CRT as opposed to upscaling?
Yeah, I mean, I could.
Uh-oh.
Look behind me. It's like 1, 2, 3, 4 CRTs like in my my general vicinity. But yeah, I mean, I still love them. There's something about that look. It doesn't even matter if it's just like composites. I mean, there is an allure to the original, like just hooking something up, like using RF or composite, just seeing how, like developers use the techniques of that technology at the time. A lot of people say like, oh, because if you run it through a scaler to an HDTV, everything looks all blocky. But we do like the blockiness, like the sharp edges. But there's definitely something to be said about using the stuff that we used growing up. And I have so many PVMs here, CRTs, that I can't give it up.
Did you have all this equipment back when you were like living in Brooklyn?
No. I mean, when we launched the channel, we had no intention of it like ever becoming like this, like video quality channel. Yeah. It was never even something that was entered our mind. It's just when we released the first episode it wasn't even called the Masterclass, and it wasn't even like it was just called RGB and the Framemeister, getting the best quality from your retro consoles. And we just thought it was going to be like a one video, because it's something that we had done a lot of research on before we launched the channel. And what we found at the time was that a lot of this information was just like walls of text. And by showing that in video form, it kind of helps relay it in an easier way. But we also wanted to make it accessible where it's not so overwhelming, and it's kind of like, okay, I can do this if I wanted to. Yeah. But we had no intention of getting into what we did. It's just like that first video did surprisingly well. It got posted on. The main reason is because it got posted on Kotaku at the time, and then at that moment, it was enormous for us. Yeah.
Well, anything getting shared by Kotaku or like Polygon is like a major, blow. Mm-hmm. But to have it on your first video, that's amazing.
Well, no, so that wasn't the first video on the channel. That was, I mean, that came out almost a year into the channel, actually. The first RGB video did.
Well, for people who don't know about the Framemeister, basically the Framemeister is like a tool that you can use for like upscaling your games and putting it in a very palatable form. The makers of that microcom, it got to the point where there's a shortage of it, basically, where they stopped making it. And I have to be honest, I probably would think the shortage of it was probably due to like people watching your videos and probably saying, "Hey guys, we gotta get this."
But I mean, the main problem is that they've stopped producing them because the chip that they use in it that handles the 480i input, which is very prevalent in the Dreamcast and the PS2 systems. So de-interlacing that requires a special chip, and that chip was end of life like a couple of years back. So they basically bought up everything that they needed that was available to produce it for as long as they could. And now it's like kind of disappearing. And there is different devices that have taken its place at this point. The open source scan converter is readily available from like sites like Video Game Perfection.
Yep.
And that it's in a lot of ways it's better than the Framemeister because it's just a line multiplier, which means that it just like on the input, it just like multiplies the lines a certain amount of time, or each, like on the input signal, it multiplies each line, and outputs 720p, 960p, or can even do up to 1080p, and there's no lag on it because it is not processing the image like the Framemeister did, where it has to run it through a frame buffer, so you get about a 1.5 frames of lag. This has no lag at all, and it is available, but it is is created by the community, by someone in the community.
Yep. And so I actually kind of want to just go right back to your time in New York. Were you like originally from New York, or did you just go to
Uh,
school here at NYU?
oh no, I didn't. I didn't go to school in New York.
Oh, so,
I grew up just outside of Buffalo, and
mhm.
then I went to the University of Buffalo. And after college, I was kind of at a loss. I went to school for video, and I was in this weird predicament where I learned to edit in in college. Like before that, I was doing like VCR to VCR, like in high school and stuff. Like, but then I learned to edit in college, but I used something called Media 100,
Mhm.
which basically, right as I was graduating, was like no longer something that anybody was interested in, because that was very early on in the rise of Final Cut Pro. So Final Cut Pro kind of slipped in there and became the prosumer version of that. So I didn't suddenly, this experience that I had using the Media 100 wasn't worth anything. So I I was in living in a small town outside of Buffalo, and then I applied for an internship because biggest mistake I'll always say that I made in college was like not doing an internship. So after I finished with college, I applied for an internship at a place in New York called Future Media Concepts,
Mhm.
where I would spend 3 months answering a phone, and in exchange I would get to, it was a training facility, so I would get to take as many classes as I wanted to. And these classes were very focused, as like Final Cut Pro, Avid, After Effects, and like a whole bunch of like variations of those. And you're in there with like 2 or 3 people, and these people worked for places like MTV or whatever, like Discovery Channel. And I would take these classes, and I got to meet a lot of people. So eventually, like, I learned a whole bunch, and I was able to use those contacts and get freelance work. So I freelanced for several years, and then I was able to land a job at a post facility that I was at for 7 years.
Ah,
So
interesting.
I mean, I didn't go to school there or anything, but I
Well,
was there for 12 years or so.
that's a long time. Well, I guess the reason I ask is, sorry, we
Uh-oh.
got
Oh, okay, we're
a little
back.
stuttering there. I guess the reason I ask is because, we love to ask like, how has like being in New York kind of impacted a little bit of like your outlook on video games, or I guess your
Mhm.
history with retro gaming or anything of that nature, especially even coming from a small town. I guess, did you have access to like all these, systems that were not really the mainstream consoles of like the SNES or Genesis? Like,
Right.
so I guess like people just love to know like your background with retro gaming, that
Mhm.
growing up and then even in New York, and then here you are now where you're kind of like one of the big voices in retro games.
Yeah, it's weird to think about, because there was, I grew up, I always loved games growing up. I was a Sega kid growing up. I like to play in the arcade. Yeah, the first game I remember like really falling in love with and being blown away by is Space Harrier, which
Mm.
I feel is probably my favorite game of all time these days. And but because I was a Sega kid, I ended up getting the lesser known system. So I got a Master System instead of a Nintendo.
You can
And I was
one of those.
Genesis.
Mhm.
And like throughout, well, I guess throughout grade school and then high school and everything, I played a lot of stuff. And I would eventually get a Super Nintendo when I got or when Street Fighter 2 came out. So that was always that was something that opened up a whole new world for me, I guess, in terms of games on other systems. Although my brother had an NES, and there was always more games to rent for that, but it was never mine. But then, like in college, like I worked for a store, electronics boutique, which would become EB Games and be bought up by GameStop.
Yep.
And I worked there like throughout college. And then after college, when I moved to New York, I basically, that was probably like 2003. So it was like tail end of like PS2.
The GameCube, yeah.
Yeah, that
Yep.
era. And I basically was just like very focused on my career at that point. I didn't play games for, I mean, except for like the must plays, like things like Metal Gear Solid 3, and I mean, I don't even remember what else. But I didn't have like an HD system for the longest time. But I just didn't play games because I was very focused on like getting work, trying to stay as busy and learn as much in that area as I could. And I think having that that time off was very good as well. But I mean, I'm not sure who else in the that are watching that can relate. But I feel like I started getting back in the games like right around when I got married. It was kind of like, okay, so like everything's kind of getting a bit like, everything's settling down now. And ever since then, like I play as much as I can. And I mean, during that time where when I had to fund my move to New York, I sold off a lot of stuff. I managed to keep a lot of the really high price stuff, at least, except for like the one I always regret is selling off my copy of Snatcher for the Sega CD. Yeah, I sold it for like $80. And, I've since rebought it, but it wasn't $80. I'll tell you that. But I mean, I was old enough, and I understood at the time, like as I was growing up, like the kind of games that I liked. And I was very lucky that I knew that I liked RPGs as a teenager. So I was able to get like stuff like Chrono Trigger, Final Fantasy 3, both Lunar games, like the day they came out. And I was able to, I held on to those, and like they stayed at my mom's house for the longest time, and then eventually would come out to New York with me for a little bit and just basically be kept in a dresser. But I mean, I'm happy that I kept all that stuff, because it wasn't just about the games themselves, but it was like that specific copy of the game. It's like those specific copies of the game like really mean something to me. They're like, I can't just like sell them and rebuy the game, because it's not mine. It's not the one that my original one.
Yeah, and I definitely do think that's what people don't really kind of understand about retro games. It's not about the video game itself. It's about what it represented in that moment in time of your life. Right. And that's what you're saying. I think it's really kind of the story for many people when they think about retro games. And I think for the generation that's playing the current systems now, they'll understand. They'll get it. Yeah, they'll realize what's going on years from now.
On the flip side to that, one of the main points of our Analog Frontier series is that it's basically brought up at the very beginning of the first entry of that, is like, is it just nostalgia? And the whole breakdown is like, it's not just nostalgia. There is something beyond that. I mean, there's a reason that these games are remembered and they're good. It's not just because I was 12 when I played this game. It's like there is a reason that these games are considered as good as they are today.
Yep. And so we only have about 2 minutes left before we get cut off from Instagram Live. So I just really want to go quick into it. Guys, if you want to catch up more videos, there's it's a rabbit hole of videos guys, that it's so much amazing content from these guys. Make sure to check out My Life on Gaming on YouTube, especially catch their their live series every Sunday, I believe you said it was.
Yep, Sunday 9 to 11 Eastern.
Yep. And then follow them across all the social media channels. They're on Facebook, Twitch, Instagram, and Twitter. And just one last, I guess, closing thought. I guess if you had to tell anyone that was getting into retro games and they could only leave with one, if they can only just have one item to kind of help them get their setup going, what would be that recommendation?
I mean,
just
at this
one.
point, just one, and just one. I'd probably say the open source scan converter at this point would be the thing to get.
Gotcha.
As long as you have a newer TV that supports it, because it outputs at a weird. It outputs at the same refresh as the original systems did. So sometimes that you might run into incompatibilities with older TVs because of that.
Gotcha. And then just any things to look forward to from your channel. Is there anything that you can give us a quick 10-second heads up on, like what's to expect?
I definitely. I mean, there's 4 more episodes of the Analog Frontiers coming. I'm working on an episode right now. It's turning out to be an hour long. It's a follow-up to our first party controllers episode, which is maybe not the exact subject that people want us to see follow up so soon, but it's just because I needed a new, I just recently moved, so I needed a relatively easy episode to put together in this new space to kind of get my workflow down.
Yep.
And I see somebody in the chat really quick said the Mister is which is true, because that is a very good device to start with. If somebody is just getting into it, like the Mister is highly recommended. I should have thought of that.
Well, we have about a minute left, and so again, I just want to thank you for taking the time to be with us tonight on Instagram Live. And yeah, again, everyone that's watching this, make sure again to tune in to My Life in Gaming on YouTube and to catch their weekly live stream every Sunday, as well as like for new episodes that are going to be coming out. Again, Corey, it's great to have you here. Great to have had you also at LI Retro last summer, and you guys can also watch the full recap of that entire panel on LI Retro's YouTube channel. It was probably one of the best panels that we've actually ever had in the 6-year history of the convention.
Really?
Yeah, a lot of people like in surveys were saying like this was like such a, you guys were in a number of different panels, but they said the panels that you guys were in were like, just loads of information to like, really digest and really great to take in, and one of the real highlights of our convention. So Corey, great to have had you tonight. And we definitely look forward to seeing more from My Life in Gaming. So
thanks for having me.
Yep. And thank you everyone for watching, and we'll catch you on the next Instagram Live.
All right. Take care.
Have a good night, everyone.